Welcome, everybody, to Mongols. This is our reaction show to Charleston Battery 0, Pittsburgh Riverhounds 0. I am Mike. Joining me once again for this one is Justin. Justin, how's it going?
It's going. It's intro music kind of betrays how this game felt and how this show is probably. It's all good. That positive, upbeat music gets us going, right?
Yeah, exactly. I always forget. It starts playing and then it's stuck in my head the rest of the day every single time I play it. So, which has been a lot recently, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I you and I were talking off air a little bit. I was like, this might end up being like a 10-minute show, and that's perfectly fine. As I mentioned, the Hounds drew 0-0 with the Battery. I think what I'm sort of most interested just right off the bat is just like, what is your gut feel? Like, how do you feel about the result? Was it good? Was it meh? Was it bad? Where do you stand?
Taking the game out of context, I guess, of the season at large and all that kind of stuff, I feel pretty good about the game actually. I think they went and did what they needed to draw on, against a good team who was in pretty good form, and so, I think with some of the other results of the season, something different may have happened. But with what has been happening and then what happened, I did a pretty good game actually.
Yeah, yeah. I it's difficult for me to find fault in this game. We did post a poll online asking people, how did you feel about the draw? 32% of people said they were happy. 54% were kind of like meh, like okay, and really only 12% were angry. I guess 13 if you round up, said that they were upset. Just sort of breaking down the game a little bit, we mentioned that if you actually go to YouTube and you try to search for the extended highlights of this game, it's less than 2 minutes long. So that tells you sort of what you need to know. This very much was a battle that was played sort of outside of the 18-yard boxes. Each team had a few chances here and there. Obviously, none of them went in. But the Hounds, we had talked a little bit in the prediction show about what we were expecting to see, and we were saying, well, to beat sort of Charleston's formation, one thing you could do is to play sort of a diamond midfield. Lily sort of took that diamond and spun it, and it was much more of a box midfield. It felt like where it was almost once we actually got into play, it was almost more like a 5-2-2-1, where you kind of had Walty and Griffin sort of sitting in front of the defense. And then you had Mertz and Kizza that were in front of them. And then Sterling was sort of running in front of those two guys. And then obviously you had Etu and Blackstock sort of bombing down the sides. Um, it, yeah, I mean, I think in a season where we've sort of seen these struggles, we still obviously didn't score. I think I would have loved to see a score, but it almost felt like there was a switch at least in the guys' standpoint. It felt like the guys were almost playing for each other more. You could see the guys throwing their bodies on the line a bit more. There were a couple of times, corner kicks or things where a ball would come out. You wouldn't just have one guy running it down. You'd have three guys running it down. Like, it just felt like this was getting back to the basics in a way that Lily Ball is about the basics. And if this is sort of a turning point for the season that we can sort of build upon, then I'm all for it. Um, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say all that because I think coming away from the game, my biggest frustration with the game probably itself.
Mm,
It was very glitchy and very audio. The audio was all messed up, and all that stuff. I was like, if they could just get this right, it would actually be enjoyable to sit and watch. And then I had missed the first half, so I went back and kind of scrolled through. Still bad, and I'm like, okay, you can't even get it right. Putting it back online for people to watch the replay,
right.
So obviously it was on the stream end, and that's just feeding to me of like, all right, cool, ESPN's paying this much money to have the games and all that kind of stuff, and then they're giving us this very kind of subpar. So that was pretty frustrating. Game itself, man, yeah, I think when you have a, probably my biggest takeaway was Walty being on the field. You have a guy like Walty, he's not going to be the like game type player, but I heard somebody talk about Sergio Busquets one time, talking about defensive midfielder, and it's like if you don't hear their name the whole game, really a good sign. And I don't think I heard Walty's name the entire game, which probably a good sign. Playing defensive mid and kind of holding it down, and so that was probably a large part of the key to our success. Going in there, getting a draw. Good game. I mean, I think it was a tight game with two teams who were playing to each other's strengths or weaknesses, however you want to. It ended up being a pretty tight game, and so I love that. Probably the two best chances of the night came off. Griffin had that rip in the first half that was just probably not as far. And then Kenny just missed the net, late in the game that would have probably sent us away with a 1-0 win. And so I mean I like that. Do I wish we had created maybe 3 or 4 more? But Charleston, so it's going to be tough to do that. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good game.
Yeah. Agreed. I think, if we're going to nitpick, obviously you'd love to see the offensive opportunities coming from our forwards. You mentioned that the two best chances were really from Forbes and Griffin, and I agree with that. But that's also a case where I think when you have a team that's sort of lacking in confidence, you're going to look to its leaders. So I'm also not surprised that Griffin and Forbes are the ones that are sort of taking the shots or trying to put the team on their back. So I think, as I mentioned, if this is sort of a stepping stone, if Lily can point to this and say, look, when you compare the two teams as we were sort of coming into this, Charleston have 15 more points than we do. They have a goal differential that's 21 more than us. And we were able to basically hold them to, I think, 2 shots on target overall. The league leader in goals, Markinick, got 1 shot and it wasn't even on target. So from a defensive standpoint, from a structural standpoint, we got our heads right. We didn't have the defensive lapses that we had seen in previous games. So that's good. So we can point to that and say, okay, we've got that worked out, hopefully. Now let's turn our attention to the attack a little bit and try to work some things out there. So, I keep referencing this team or referring to this team as being on a knife's edge. I think, at least from an attacking standpoint, we obviously still are. But from a defensive standpoint, what we saw in this game against a team that's clearly, one of the classes of the East, we went into their house and made them look average. And so that's great. And that sort of continues on the trend. I think Mondo mentioned, we did similarly to Indy, and we did similarly to Memphis. We gave up. We sort of had the 2 mental lapses, but we were the dominant team. So I think I'm feeling better about the squad. They just got to get a few more things worked out. And so hopefully we can do that here soon.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Last couple in the sense that I feel like we're playing better, and you even talked about the defense and kind of what happened last. What I have noticed is that I think we had some complaints a couple weeks ago about Osamanu and Suber, and both of them played good games last night, and didn't give up anything, and it was just a solid defensive performance. And I think some of that was indicated by when Bob went to make his center back sub, late in the game, like he normally the field, which is not his normal,
Yeah.
sub late in the game. And so, he must have felt fairly confident as well. And so I feel like if that can continue, you can kind of go back to the last couple of games. Um, if you can keep getting 0-0 draws or keep trying to keep people off the course, the score sheet at some point that goes in, and then you walk away with a 1-0 win, and that's fun. And so I think it's just trying to figure out, how do you get that goal? How do you get to a point where you finally, and there was a lot of situations last night where it's just the one last pass. It wasn't like, hey, we didn't get there. We got there. We got to the box, or we got close to the box, and it's like if you make a different decision, or put a little different spin on the pass or whatever, then maybe that's getting to the player that, I think about one time dribbled probably 30, 40 yards down the field, and they gave him the space pass to a two running down the line, and it just didn't get to him. It's like, well, if that ball was another yard or so, a two gets that, crosses it, maybe we get a goal there too. And it's just like, man, if we could get one to go, and then the outside one to go, maybe the floodgates open, and all of a sudden they all start happening. But I think it's got to come off of Sterling or Kizza, to give them that. Okay, we can score goals.
Yeah. Here's hoping. We got a game coming up this weekend at Hartford. Hartford just lost this weekend, so now we sort of flip spaces in the standings. We're now one ahead of them. This could be a good opportunity, especially since I believe we then have a mid-game week against Louisville. So it will be interesting to sort of see how Lily approaches the game at Hartford versus home to Louisville later in the week. But yeah, I agree. It feels like it's close. I felt really good at the end of the game, like more so than I thought I would with a 0-0 draw. But I think everything that we sort of discussed leading up to this game, knowing how good Charleston has been, knowing sort of where the odds were to see that the Hounds could go in and succeed in this way, it was just like, great job, well done. Come on home. You got the point on the road. Let's see if we can regroup here and maybe get 3 next weekend and just keep building from there. So I really don't have sort of a ton more to add beyond that. It was just, good effort. The guys stood up for each other and got the point. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you made Charleston work. I think that was the key. It wasn't like coming away with like, Charleston's chances just didn't fall. Charleston didn't really have a whole lot of clear-cut chance. Their best chance of the night was Torres shooting at Dick and putting it right, and he kind of batted it away, which led to a little bit of a weird situation. But for the most part, he wasn't struggling with trying to save that. I think it's a big testament to the Hounds of like, all right, you made this team work. You made a good team to draw. And realistically, you probably had the better chances on the night. So if those start falling at some point, I just told Laura Ellen halfway through the game, I was like, they just won't go. Like, it's just like, Griffin, that rip from Griffin, the hit ball I've seen in a long, long time, off of a Hound's foot. And it just didn't go.
Yeah.
And then his header was as hard as could be, and it just wasn't on frame. And so close.
Yeah.
So close.
It almost makes you think like what if you're Lily or you're, Rob Vincent or you're Bushy, just like you just keep going to the locker room, just keep going, guys. Like you're so close. Just keep going. Trust me, it's gonna happen. But it's like, what else can you do? So yeah. Well, I think that's it. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what else to say about this one. I good result. We got a whole week's worth of prep coming up. We're going to be talking to some Hartford fans. I do think we're supposed to talk to Robbie Mertz this week. It was supposed to be last week. He had some other commitment, so I think we're going to shift and do it this week. We'll do our prediction show later in the week once we know a little bit more about what's going on. And then we'll get ready to take on Hartford on the road. So,
yep.
Well, Justin, thanks for joining me. It's been a good 15 minutes just sort of recapping what happened here. Appreciate it. Everyone, let us know what you thought about this game, what you think about sort of all the coverage, all the shows that we've been doing, what your thoughts are on Hartford, all of that. Otherwise, well done, Hounds. And thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you very, very soon.